What is up, y'all? Welcome back to episode 74 of That's No Moon Pod. Kind of wanted to have a little bit of a throwback episode this week. There's not a whole lot going on with Star Wars or Marvel and things like that. So I really wanted to take this episode to really kind of just go into a lot of these topics regarding UFOs, non human intelligence, just things of the universe that kind of just been going through my mind lately. Um, Earlier this week, Terrence Howard, the actor, appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was going deep on some crazy stuff, just talking about the universe and how everything kind of works. And that episode really kind of blew up just by all the things that they were talking about. Um, Joe Rogan also had some other professor or something who was an expert in the multiverse or just kind of the whole simulation theory. And last week, I also came across this post from a supposed whistleblower who put this long post on Reddit, and it surfaced onto Twitter. And I read through the whole thing, and I was just completely just engulfed in what this person was saying, if it even is true. But again, just all this stuff has been kind of going through my mind, and I've been really just consuming a lot of this sort of different topics regarding just the mysteries of the universe and kind of what might be going on with everything. This episode might be kind of a blabber fest or whatever, but I got a lot of stuff that's been going through my mind, and kind of just want to give my thoughts on things and kind of give my opinions and whatnot on just all these different things. Um, but yeah, I guess I'll start off with the Reddit whistleblower. Um, Supposedly, this person, they didn't give information on who or when exactly they were working for these secret government contractors and whatnot, because obviously they're trying to protect their livelihood. And if these things get out, and they're pretty easily able to find these certain people just by figuring out, okay, this person said that they worked here during this time, so it kind of narrows down who these people are and make it a lot easier for them to be found and possibly hurt in some way. um, but I'll kind of go over some of the talking points that this whistleblower had said. um, Supposedly this person worked at multiple facilities regarding NHI, non human intelligence, and worked on certain crafts as well. Um, and pretty much one of the things that really stuck out to me was he pretty much was saying that the stuff that he knows about is kind of a lot of the things that David Grush, the more famous whistleblower to have come out recently, pretty much was talking about regarding NHI and the whole research about it. Uh, but one of the things that he said was how a lot of these secret government contractors or just overall groups that deal with these sort of things, these above top secret projects, and um, they were saying that a lot of these places that these people work at are pretty much in plain sight. You could be going to the dentist, going to the doctor or whatever, and it's just at some normal looking business building with, other businesses inside. Um, and that's kind of how they pretty much stay out of sight, by pretty much being in public in certain places. The only difference is really is that sometimes they'll have just heavy security, making sure nobody tries anything funny with them. Um, but one of the talking points that this whistleblower said, that um, he says it was a sort of an open secret that he was led on at some point in the late 90s, that if a large scale invasion or threat to the mainland were to materialize, the US had an ultimate trump card of sorts that would render everything that they were working on as completely obsolete. And so, pretty much, you're saying if it were to come down to it, all the stuff that they've been working on, all the technology, they wouldn't even use it. Um, Pretty much just saying that if an invasion of some sorts occurred, it'd pretty much just be a whole nuke fest. They wouldn't even try to, do something to where they bust out all the alien technology or these crafts to help fight back against it. They would pretty much just nuke it all just to be safe. Um, and this person has worked from multiple different facilities. Um, and again, one of the things he was saying is that um, all these people that are working there are really kind of handpicked, but they all have some sort of knowledge and just overall understanding on these different types of things that they could be trying to reverse engineer. Um, Kind of like what Bob Lazar had said many years ago and still says to this day. Um, but this person also says that he doesn't want to give out too much information on who or where he worked at, because supposedly he's a professor somewhere at some university, so it would be pretty easy for this person to be found. Um, and again, just kind of going into how these places kind of stay out of sight. This person says that the first office I worked at was an office building that didn't stand out in any way at all. Says, I believe our neighbors in the office park were a fashion studio and a dentist, among others. The difference was our building had 24/7 armed security. The first few days were heavy paperwork and onboarding. One of my old bosses called me on an office phone to talk to me before I was officially onboarded. As a management nerd, the biggest challenge of working for this agency is that it's a paperless office. It has its own highly sophisticated capabilities with hundreds of archival documents. The implication was that unless it is absolutely had to be saved, was to never write anything down. Says, I remember an early colleague telling me a Gantt chart is a great way to get fired. This was a challenge at first, remembering all this information with no documentation. It's not something I'm particularly built for, especially when the information is about NHI. Goes on, later I worked in a facility within a facility, just like the one I had tried to inspect. It stored a craft. Being near the craft for extended periods of time is extremely dangerous. So I guess these crafts kind of give off some kind of energy, whether it's radiation or just some kind of crazy thing that is really harmful to us, um, especially if it is being experimented on with power. I didn't observe any injuries to anyone while I was there, but all sorts of long-term nasty injuries were relayed to me through rumors and warnings. The craft was shaped like a dreidel without the handle. So pretty much kind of like a acorn, if you will. Um, there was a large exterior piece that went missing when it was recovered. So whether this thing was crashed somewhere, or there have been a lot of stories where supposedly these crafts have been kind of just placed there for us to find for whatever reason. Um, the theory is it acted as a stabilizer, although some argue it was a crude weapon. It sat in a custom hydraulic rig that could be used to rotate it into all sorts of different positions. Kind of like those aero trim astronaut training balls where they spin you around. Says, I wasn't on the team that got to use the rotation rig. The rig was so large and extensive, I spent a few weeks thinking it was part of the craft before someone told me otherwise. Typically, the craft would be held on its side in the rig for easier storage. Its weight just naturally sat it that way, although it was intended to be flown vertically. The shape was directly informed by its purpose. Every shape is custom molded into a metallic material that would revolutionize the way we travel if we had it. And following the topic as much as I can manage to, I've seen some other people mention the material. There were some material scientists that had been working there for decades. I never got to go inside the craft. It was guarded 24/7, but boy, did I want to look. And he kind of goes on to talk about how these secret agencies kind of go about hiring certain people. Uh, the agency goes out of its way to hire individuals who have little interest in working in this space at all. So I guess obviously these people don't want to be hiring people like me if I were to ever, have these super high credentials within just education and engineering or whatnot, because obviously I'm going to want to know more than I probably should or what they would want me to learn about. Um, Said they recruit particularly out of BYU, although you have to have a contractor or government career for around a decade to be considered for an interview. So you got to have some high credentials just to even get a phone call from these people. Um, when I worked at the second facility, the sorts of people that were there were frustrating to interact with because my initial reaction to working in that facility was just extreme excitement, and it wasn't shared. I believe this is partially responsible for the stagnation, high turnover rate, and compartmentalization. That's kind of what Bob Lazar had talked about before on Joe Rogan as well, to where it seemed like these groups would get put into different sort of teams, and there was a whole lot of collaboration between these different groups. They all kind of got assigned their certain tasks and had to kind of stay in line in order to kind of prevent any kind of compromise, or anything that could potentially get any of this information out to the public. Um, he goes on and says, I quickly learned who to trust and gain some enormous help, or people that he got to work with. Part of why I'm being secretive about my ID is because the turnover rate results in a sort of summer camp work environment. It's easy to point to classes of people in various non leadership positions that all were hired, fired, or quit at similar times. If I said when I started or ended where I worked, I'd be easily identifiable because there are so few people that match my description. Leadership has been there forever. No, not literally, he says. Says the agency is divided up into several wings, not unlike the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Says I'm not insinuating they're a shadow government, but the wings check and balance each other in a way a government is at least designed to. These wings include mechanical engineering, biologic research, weapons research, computer science, tracking, and what he'll call anthropology. And he also says um, there's pretty much a crash recovery team as well, because that's what colleagues who are planning to come forward will call it, and security. Um, he goes on saying, what's unique is these subgroups exist all as part of a different parent government organizations and are HQ'd where their parent agencies are. For example, the tracking wing is sort of embedded as R&D at NORAD. This is a simplification of the actual paperwork involved. It's honestly complicated and I don't know much about how it works. I do know that this is how they maintain funding even when the parent agency goes completely dark for stretches of time. It's worth mentioning that these departments employ at most 50 people each. It's typically much lower than that. This is why we're all pushing for whistleblower protection. It's not hard to identify us because there are so few of us in the first place. Okay, so pretty much saying they got their own ways of being able to continue to get certain amount of funds even though these agencies are completely dark. And since there's so few of these people that get to work in these certain projects, um, the more whistleblowers that were able to come out, it'd be a lot more beneficial for, you know, just the overall progression and just overall knowledge for all of us to pretty much figure out what exactly is going on. Um, he goes on saying, mechanical engineering is exactly what it sounds like. It's the most extensive, the oldest, and most compartmentalized. We have crashed craft in various states. We had a recovered craft that worked almost perfectly that was shot down by ourselves. I saw this coming, and it's part of why I quit. There's a lot of information about this wing in the public sphere. Part of their job is to determine what each shape of craft is used for. This is an important job because we're unsure of NHI's intentions. If we discover the designs are intended to hurt us, action will have to be taken. I don't know what that means in practice, but it's what the engineers mostly studied. Consider this lecture around the 10-minute mark about the differing characteristics of an F-22 versus a passenger plane. Now imagine figuring out the purpose of the passenger plane versus the F-22. Since we're humans, and those are not human designs, or the F-22 is a human design, eventually a team could figure it out. It's not as easy when the designs aren't for us, or purposes we fully understand. Triangles are the most impressive design, and we don't have one. It's likely China does. Leadership is mad about that. This team discovered a long time ago that the reason why craft appears so bright to us humans is because it's not really light, but rather the product of the crazy amounts of power these craft require. Sort of like smoke coming out of an exhaust pipe. So that could be kind of what he was talking about earlier about if you are standing too near one of these crafts while it's on, you could possibly hurt yourself. And I found that part interesting because when he says it's not really light, whenever these crafts are appearing to be super bright in different colors or whatever, um, it's pretty much just the power that these crafts are exuding. Um, he goes on saying, biology is something I personally suck at. Even at the high school level, I can say the NHI look like the aliens from Close Encounters. My source who told this to me was unsure if it was true or not. I didn't learn much about this wing. It's the most secretive. I do know its HQ is hidden in almost plain sight. I still feel like the guy who told me where it had to have been lying because it was just too obvious. There are bodies stored in other locations apart from their main HQ. Weapons research is a large wing and is fairly new. It was absorbed by the Space Force when it was created. Frustration with the Space Force as a whole was part of why I left shortly before it started. I don't know much about it, has a high turnover rate and is dangerous to work in. People were injured and compensated by a large private aerospace contractor instead of the USG. Its main job is to strap a nuke to a reverse engineered craft and just see what the hell happens. So, these people working with these certain crafts, these weapon researchers, I guess they're really trying to figure out how to strap a nuke to these crafts just in case something really goes down. Um, High turnover rate in this specific research wing. Um, that just sounds crazy to me that they want to strap a nuke to one of these crafts. Of course, right? It just sounds like something that humans would want to eventually try to do. He goes on saying, computer science is or was HQ'd at a facility in my home state. This is rare because most of the other wings are within a stone's throw of DC or Nevada. This is mostly based around researching the craft's navigation system. The navigation in every craft is the same. The craft use a system that originally befuddled generations of researchers, but it's essentially a 3D uh, Dijkstra algorithm. A 3D Dijkstra algorithm. It finds points around the craft and chooses the most efficient possible route through space-time to get to that point. Some of the parameters it uses to gauge efficiency are totally unknown to us and are a serious point of contention. It's not autonomy, but rather obstacle avoidance, not unlike what you would see in a self-driving car. So it's not like the Teslas, how they have that, self-driving system or anything like that. This thing kind of finds some way to find the quickest path and being able to avoid, anything that could be in its way. Um, but the self-driving car could go through air, space, and water without worrying about what its median is. So that's kind of pretty much saying how these things are able to easily fly through the air or go through the water without, any kind of resistance to gravity or any sorts of things like that. Um, Additionally, the algo accounts for the craft's place in time. I don't think this means that the craft time travel in the way we think they can, but rather go so fast that they experience dilation and can hit objects in the future and potentially past at their target destination. It's possible they do this on purpose sometimes. I don't know much about the internal programming of the computer or how it works. There are a few senior scientists that hold that information dear. Okay, so these things, their flight, the way that they are able to do all these things, he kind of talks about how it's sort of some sort of like telepathic way is how they're flying. Obviously, they're not really using any kind of steering wheel or some kind of um, handle that you would find normally in a regular aircraft that we use here on Earth. Um, it's more telepathic, and it kind of is able to go wherever the person or NHI that is operating the craft tells it to go using their mind. Um, it goes on saying, speaking of avoidance tracking, like I mentioned, is or was part of NORAD. The NHI deploy craft of various shapes and sizes all the time. I don't want to claim that they have advanced cloaking techniques, but from what I heard, the tracking department basically is an internal game of cat and mouse. They don't have adequate technology to track the transmedium craft. All I would say on record is NHI know we can track them and know how to avoid us. They actually avoid detection by going underwater, especially in the case of particularly um, large craft. It's interesting that historical UFO designs mimic the designs of buildings and vehicles of that time period. Whether this was just humans not being able to reference what the designs look like, or a form of mimicry, is anyone's guess. Someone in leadership knows the answers, but I don't. It's important to note not everyone at NORAD was part of the tracking team, but the tracking team is embedded in NORAD and interfaces with them on a minute to minute basis. This leads to scenarios where NORAD will report an object and the tracking team will silently acknowledge but give no explanation. This leads to a catastrophic incident that happened after I left but knew about from a colleague. Supposedly, tracking is being moved to the Space Force to clear up those miscommunications. If I were working there, I would probably be working on that onboarding process. NORAD was moved to Cheyenne not only to protect from a foreign adversary, but also because the facility is uniquely equipped to track NHI craft. So these things flying around have many different shapes and sizes that they flying around here on Earth, and they avoid detection by us by going underwater, which I always found interesting because we know so much about space, but we know very little about our oceans, and it's right here on our same planet. And it's very difficult for us to go, certain depths into the water. So for them to be able to fly down in our oceans, it'd be a lot easier for them to go undetected and sort of just stay out of sight from anyone really seeing them. It goes on saying, anthropology and computer science were at one point decompartmentalized to study how the NHI interact with the craft. The NHI are linked to their craft in a way that borders on biological. The actual way they interface with the components of the craft is not as sophisticated. Um, Although it's an immature way, the way they interface, um, kind of saying that the way the piston moves with the gas pedal in a car, it's similar, albeit much simpler than that way NHI interact with their craft. They send signals using their body to systems that control the craft. It's hypothesized that they can and prefer to control craft remotely, but I'm not sure if we were really researching this. So they could be flying these things and not even necessarily being inside them ever. They could be in some secret base or even in a complete other dimension, but somehow, some way, they're still able to fly these things just by using their mind. Um, when people wonder how a super intelligent being can crash, this is part of the answer in conjunction with the navigation system malfunctioning. I personally don't think the NHI feels stress as we do, but if they had some sort of heightened stress level, their activity it could override the pathfinding system instead of letting it do its job. That's how there could be an accident. So you hear this a lot from people saying if these crafts or beings are so highly advanced with their technology and just understanding of different things that us humans can't even think of, this could possibly be a way of why these crafts could have crashed, Roswell specifically. You hear a lot of people argue against the point of where, you know, again, if these things are so highly advanced, they could fly through the air at a blink of an eye and do all these crazy maneuvers. How in the world could these things possibly even crash? You would think that it's just like a perfect thing, but it's saying here that whoever is operating these crafts, if they have any kind of, just stress level go out of whack, or they get distracted in some sort of way, or they're not fully um, with the craft mentally, that's pretty much how these things could possibly be crashing on our Earth. It goes on saying a smaller subset of this wing focuses on how humans can interface with craft that are currently in the sky. If you see an image of a large disc above a gas station in the snow, it was someone in this department summoning a craft, not unlike how cheap RC car controllers can interfere with each other when used at the same time. Some people are better suited to interfere with NHI craft than others. We're not sure why. So, some people could possibly have some sort of higher level of just overall understanding, or could just have a better or stronger mind that could either summon these crafts or have some sort of way of being able to fly these things. We know that everyone's built different. Some people have a higher stress tolerance and are able to kind of keep their composure and keep their cool under high stress situations. Um, it goes on saying, on somewhat of a comedic note, one colleague was harshly punished for using this research to encounter NHI craft at a party. There was an outdoor bonfire um, where there was alcohol and questions about what she did for work. She wasn't killed or anything, just called a dumbass and told to never ever do that again. So this person supposedly was at some kind of bonfire with friends or whatnot, and telepathically, somehow, some way, was able to conjure up a craft to sort of appear at their bonfire. And there's certain abilities that humans have. I've heard of different things from um, different people just throughout time talking about how they'll have a group of people out in the middle of nowhere, kind of, and they'll all kind of use their energy together to somehow summon a craft to appear in the sky, whether it's just a ball of light that kind of does these crazy maneuvers, but somehow, some way, certain people are able to kind of conjure up this kind of energy or telepathic way of summoning these crafts to just appear. Um, so it's not like this isn't something to where I haven't heard anything like this before. It's been talked about by many different people before. Um, and it kind of goes on to talking about the crash recovery. Um, Crash recovery probably has the most people involved. It's split up among several parent orgs, but funding and funneled away from it and into other departments where there is little activity. This is common among the entire agency as funding and staff get balanced between the different wings based on progress or lack thereof. Most of the crash recovery staff are staff from tracking and security that are involved in crash recovery. It's also made up of members of all of our favorite three-letter organizations. Crash Recovery's overall structure was referred to as a volunteer fire department. It's typically some people playing pool and watching movies, but when the need arises, all hands on deck from the current staff and on-call members. So these people are just pretty much just chilling, and whenever something happens, a supposed crash occurs, then they all pretty much drop on what they're doing and head to wherever the crash site is. Crashes are exceedingly rare. The number of crashes go down exponentially because they learn to avoid the cause of the crash. When they crash, they make no effort to retrieve the debris. Say, for instance, I personally believe some crashes weren't crashes, but were NHI parking a vehicle for us because there were no bodies recovered and the craft was in perfect shape. So, kind of what I was talking about earlier, sometimes it seems like these crafts are sometimes just placed there for us to find. Um, it's not like suppose how in Roswell the craft crashes in the desert and there's all sorts of you know debris and bodies there. Um, Sometimes it seems like they just kind of leave a leave us a little gift, just park it there and wait for us to find it and eventually recover it. Uh, Security, to put it mildly, are terrifying. Imagine the very best of the SEALs, NSA, and Secret Service all working together. They are short staffed, but that staff is not only elite, but dedicated. Their numero uno rule is people that mention the agency name are killed. It's not a question, and it happened during my time. You'll hear more about them as news about the retaliation Dave comes out with. So, Dave Grush is supposed to have these talks in the near future, kind of giving about more information on what exactly he worked on and just overall different topics. Um, but we've heard about this for a long time of whistleblowers or certain people that have kind of come out on these certain agencies and secret government projects, and they're silenced. It looked like it was you know done by self-harm, but in reality it's these security teams that even if you mention these certain names, then you're pretty much off. um, it goes on saying, I wasn't directly interviewed by Dave, but I know several people who were. The security team figured it out quickly, and you could say they aren't his fans. So obviously, these people still working within these agencies don't like David Grush. They don't like the fact that he's even coming out with all this stuff publicly. Um, they constantly monitor all discussions about the topic, but rarely act in real life unless absolutely necessary. They staff facilities like the second one I worked at. This team also actively engages in disinformation, gaslighting, and other similar campaigns. Their goal is to keep the US's secrets about this tech secret because other countries are close to breakthroughs. They also conduct counter intel on what other countries know and counter intel about what they know about what we know. Not to sound crazy, but the security team will see this at some point or another, so a friendly hello to them. Pretty much just kind of waving at them, saying, I know all this stuff. I know that, they try to let out as much disinformation as they can, not only to the public, but to other countries, because the US, we're not the only ones with these things and working on these things. It has to be a global thing. Russia and China and the UK. Um, and for good reason, we don't want, one of our enemies to possibly have a major breakthrough with these technologies because it could possibly lead to something dangerous and if any other country has a leg up on us, that's never a good thing. Um, I have a hunch that the current public facing task forces are actually their own wing within a security. A friend of mine texted me once, Sean Kirkpatrick, you can get your ass kicked. Don't confuse these public facing task forces with the work Dave and Co. are doing. Dave is the real deal. So, Sean Kirkpatrick, the whole person who's in charge of the Arrow thing, has just kind of been heavily criticized, and I think rightfully so. There's been a lot of things that he's been asked about and kind of given the cold shoulder or acted like, he had no involvement in this, or just overall just seems like Sean Kirkpatrick is a liar. Whether or not, he was briefed on certain things and knows, certain things about these different topics and is just not obligated to release any of the information to the public. But um, this whistleblower in particular saying that Dave Grush is the real deal, and what he's been saying is pretty much fact. Um, Talking about the leadership, he goes on saying, I should mention that the leadership is kind of its own wing. It's not on paper, but they operate above all the other departments. Leadership is made up of managers who pay close attention to each wing. They discuss info they know and bring up contradictions to upper managers. I don't know how far this chain goes up. I reported to someone who reported to someone. I believe it goes higher than that. I have no idea who is at the top or what their credentials are. I suspect they're in the private sector, with their bankroll disguised as R&D for government contracts. Leadership honestly made the right choices with the information they had, at least when I was there. Some bad people started to get in charge and change the way things worked among the middle managers and individual teams. This pissed people off and led to multiple catastrophes. As far as I know, they faced no discipline. So you hear about this a lot where people, come into certain leadership role and they try to dip their toes into different certain things and how everything was already kind of being done. And from what this person's saying, um, there was multiple casualties, catastrophes, and these people that were involved with these things or had some sort of, you know, being the person who caused all of this face no discipline, kind of just gets swept under the rug. Um, and they go on by saying that was exhaustive. Those are the wings of the agency that I knew about during my time there. It feels good to get this off my chest. I've been sort of keeping up to date on the topic's coverage in mainstream media and want to give some of my thoughts on this. If the US comes out directly and says we have craft, we have bodies, it means we are on the verge of a serious global conflict like we've never seen before. They will only reveal this to the public if absolutely necessary. The way the information is going to come out is through people like Dave and further probing from Congress. Now, all of it should be public information, but I believe the technology that is just sitting somewhere would completely revolutionize the way we live. I don't think anything significant will happen in my lifetime. It was a frustrating job because everything was so stagnant and had so much potential. We're talking about technology so advanced it could render every single current global issue obsolete. If we solved two major issues with the craft and were able to manufacture them, we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves. The technology being incorporated into our technical revolution is a hoax. I heard one theory from a guy at a bar that the transistors at Bell Labs were inspired by technology at Area 51. This is a joke. The technology makes transistors look like sticks and stones. I believe multiple species of NHI is misinformation spun up by the security team. There are mystery wings of the agency I didn't get to learn about during my time. It's possible one of these researches other species, but I doubt that. So this person's saying that they're pretty much never gonna willingly come out and say that we have crafts, we have these bodies of NHI, um, and the only way for them to really do that is if there's some kind of major global conflict, some sort of major world war again. Um, but this person agrees that, you know, obviously a lot of this technology that they're hiding could just completely change the way we live our lives. It could just change the way we, you know, go to work every day, the way we, power up our homes and just overall ways of transportation and just way of living could absolutely change with all this stuff that's being hidden from us. This person also goes on saying, talking about more about NHI, um, the NHI potentially experiment on us and definitely experiment on animals. So cattle mutilations, um, people that have been claimed to have been abducted by these things. Um, says we have no idea why. The main reason you'll never see organized disclosure is because nobody can agree on what to say. We simply don't know enough, namely the NHI's intentions and where they are from. The anthropology wing believes the NHI are controlled by intelligence that is beyond our current understanding of how life works. The biology reports conflict with us, which is why things can be compartmentalized. If the government were to disclose info, they'd have to get the story straight. We also have no idea where they are from. We, as in everyone I worked with, it's possible someone in high up in leadership knows. I don't think the answer is as simple as another planet or caves on Earth. So, obviously, talking about other dimensions, just the way our senses are unable to detect certain things and just how things just kind of could always be there at all times. And we just have no way of being able to detect it. Um, the reason why specific facility locations are kept from the public is because some of them are sensitive and also not entirely NHI research based. It would be possible for some TikTokers and hippies to storm the first office I worked at if they were careful. Every place where the agency works is also home to other operations, which is why it's so hard to identify where they are. Lower leadership is HQ'd in DC, and the upper management is split between Nevada, Australia, and other foreign countries. Security are everywhere and potentially even work remotely without an HQ. I was contracted I was contacted by a documentary filmmaker when some of my friends were, but I turned it down due to my specific involvement and how easy it would be to track me down if I gave particularly juicy info. I believe the story will come out soon. I no longer work in the field and teach full time. And that's pretty much everything that this supposed whistleblower has to say. But I think just, whether or not it's all true or not, I just found this post really interesting because, again, it's just another one of these people that have come out to talk about the certain topic and try to give any kind of information to the public in some sort of way. Obviously, this person isn't going to do the whole David Grush route because that takes a whole other level of, courage to be able to come out publicly and speak against what's been hidden from the public. Um, but going back to kind of what he was talking about with the NHI experimenting on us, and how pretty much, the way that their biology kind of has some sort of just crazy way of being able to go undetected, and how the NHI are controlled by an intelligence that is beyond our current understanding of life. Um, when I was talking about the whole Terrence Howard, Joe Rogan podcast and the multiverse and the simulation theory episode. Um, there has to be just certain things that go on in our universe and just the reasons why we're all here and why anything is here at all. Um, nothing is nothing just appears. It all has to be created somehow, some way, by certain things having to go absolutely right. I don't think there's a whole lot of luck or chance regarding just why there are so many different planets and galaxies and just everything that kind of just gets swept under the rug on why we're here on this planet that's perfectly distanced from the sun and why we have the perfect amount of water and atmosphere and gravity and all that stuff. Um, and just the fact that us humans have these certain capabilities with our minds and just overall being able to do things that no other species on this planet can do. Um, and just how everything kind of seems like it's, when you really think about it, again, it's not all by chance. It seems like it's all been manipulated or in some sort of way been given to us by some higher force that we couldn't even possibly imagine or come up with the words to even describe it all. Um, if you believe in God, if you believe in whatever, um, I think at the end of the day, we all gotta kind of just really think about everything that exists and that, you know, us being here at this moment of time and everything that's happened. Um, it's all such a mystery still. Whenever we die, is it that do we go into another realm, another dimension? Do we just completely restart all over again and kind of, live the same life until we get everything right? Or if you're one of those people that believes that, when the lights shut off, that's it, you're just asleep forever. Um, I don't personally believe in all that. I think, um, there's just certain mysteries about things like our dreams and um, just the overall psychology of our minds and our brains and just everything inside our bodies. Um, I think there's more to life than what is on the surface, and I think there's more, to death as well than just everything going dark. Um, but again, if this person's telling the truth, um, I'm hoping that more people like this can kind of come out eventually and just give us a little bit more information on everything because a lot of this has so much more to deal with than just UFOs and little gray aliens with big eyes flying around in our air. Um, it's more of just the bigger picture, and I think the more and more that we learn about all this, I think the more better of a species that we can become. Just overall understanding of us humans and why we even do all the things that we do in our everyday lives. But I'll try to post uh, as much of the paragraphs that the whistleblower put on this video. Um, y'all let me know what y'all thought about all of this. I knew this was going to be a bit of a longer episode than normal. Um, this was just one of those topics that I think, at least for me, you can go on and on about, um, just because there's just so many questions that you can ask about this stuff, and there's so little answers that it's just going to be a continued ongoing conversation with all of us. Um, but yeah, just let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. Y'all think this person's legit? If y'all have any other kind of information on what this person was talking about, let me know. Because we need to keep pushing this topic forward. Um, the more and more people to just come out and talk more openly about this subject, it'll just do wonders for our understanding of life. But I think that'll wrap it up for this week's episode. Again, like, comment, subscribe. Still posting my comics on my IG and Snapchat, new releases, variant covers. Go check it out. The links will be down in the description. But until next week, y'all stay safe, and I'll catch y'all on the flip. Peace.